This is Hill House near Helensburgh, and it's a wonderful example of the significance and vitality of women artists in the late 19th and early 20th century in Scotland. And it was the shared vision of Margaret MacDonald and Charles Rennie Mackintosh. And indeed in their partnership, Mackintosh said, "I had the talent, but she had the genius." Margaret was one of a number of female artists who gained a considerable reputation during this period.
So around about the mid-1880s, 1890s, you get this flowering in Glasgow of this incredible group of artists, most of whom were women. And they were producing art which was on a level with anything that was being produced in Europe at the same time. They worked in disparate groups, but retrospectively they've been known by this blanket term, the Glasgow Girls.
Glasgow was a city crying out for artists and designers to feed into the industries which it had become famous for, like shipbuilding and textiles. So in 1845, the Glasgow School of Art was founded as a government school of design. The school experienced a golden age under the directorship of Francis Newbery. Newbery legitimised craft and design like textiles, ceramics, jewellery, metalwork and interior design.
What was known as the applied arts. It was deemed to be sort of womanly and not very serious. But under him and his wife, Jessie Newbery, they treated it much more as a kind of equivalent to painting and drawing, if you like.
Many of the so-called Glasgow girls would train under Francis Newbery, including Jessie M, Helen Paxton Brown, Annie French, Anne Macbeth, Frances and Margaret MacDonald, and Katherine Cameron. This type of training was essential for refining their skills, but also it defined their career paths. For example, Jessie M was encouraged by Newbery to pursue her distinctive style. She elongated her figures and flattened the forms into a decorative composition, rendered in bold outlines. This all-embracing approach to art and design also defined the work of the four, Margaret and Frances Macdonald, and their husbands, Charles Rennie Mackintosh and Herbert McNair. And as can be seen at Hill House, their aesthetic was reflected in every facet of the building and design. The sisters were both highly skilled watercolourists. Margaret also experimented with gesso, whilst Frances was a talented metalworker and embroiderer. Fostering a strong community of like-minded artists, critics and writers was essential for female artists to achieve personal and professional independence in an art world dominated by men.
It was an interesting period in Britain generally, actually. Opportunities for women artists were pretty good, but for example in London, if you trained at the Slade School in London, women and men were taught in the same classes and they were allowed to study from life. In Glasgow, that was not the case. You had to, if you're a woman, you had to study from plaster cast or from a draped model. And so some of the artists like Bessie MacNicol, Katherine Cameron, Stanza Dean, they went to France. The Académie Colarossi allowed men and women to attend the same classes. So they were much more enlightened. The majority of the artists did live in Glasgow, and they benefited from the establishment of the Glasgow Ladies' Arts Club in 1882. It gave them an opportunity to meet, to get together, to exchange ideas about art, and to exhibit in a, albeit quite sort of modest space. So later in her career, Jessie M moved to Kirkcudbright with her husband E.A. Taylor, and they bought this house, Greengate. It developed into quite a thriving artist colony. Other artists came and visited Kirkcudbright and worked there, and a lot of artists came to stay with her, a lot of women artists, and they really encouraged them and, furthered them in their careers.
Despite the diversity of their practice and their diverging career paths, the women often found ways to support one another through close collaboration and networking. And looking back, the factor that really unites them all is the pursuit of innovation, not only in their art, but in society as a whole.
And women were really pushing back against the system at that time. And you get the emergence of the women's suffrage movement in Scotland, predominantly in Edinburgh, funnily enough, to start with, which was much less progressive as a city. But then, of course, spread to the rest of Scotland. A number of the Glasgow girls were associated, they supported the suffrage movement by making banners. And so definitely the Glasgow girls were associated with that kind of activity.
When the achievements of the female artists who have become known as the Glasgow Girls are measured against the massive changes in society, they become all the more impressive. Their efforts helped pave the way for more women to pursue a career in art than ever before.
Thanks to the pioneering work of people like Jude Burkhauser, we now recognise that these Glasgow artists had a huge impact right across that whole period from about 1885 to the First World War. Historically, one tends to remember the male artists, so Charles Rennie Mackintosh had rather dominated the scene, but because of the research that was done in the 1990s and later, these women have been kind of revived, and we realised that they really did have a huge and important impact, and it's really important that we give them their place.